Hey, babies, hey, babies, hey, babies. Hi, everyone. Oh, Callow lost his phone already. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. What's up? What's going
What's
on?
going on? How you doing after yesterday's doubleheader, man?
I'm gonna rethink that one in the future. Holy cow!
I mean, to
Wow.
be fair, I don't think we saw a 4-1 Spirit game coming. So that was the other part about that.
No. Yeah, no. It was fun to do. For those who don't know what we're talking about, I called the Spirit. Well, Callow was there too. Spirit Kansas City match at 12, and then called the Commanders preseason finale at 8. And it's not just calling the games, like we had extended pregame shows. And I was talking to Mike Tirico and Josh Harris before the game. So you might hear it in my voice today. And I'll tell the background over the last couple of days. So I don't know what's going on with my voice. I've had like this happened to me last year once where it just went out for like a week. And it started happening, or I started to get this feeling that it was going to happen like Wednesday. And so I just went on full throat spray, throat drops, tea, like reading on the internet what to do about sore throat. Like, but I didn't feel sick. Like, I never felt sick at any point in time. So I've deduced it's probably like an allergy. I actually read that like sometimes your allergies can affect your vocal cords this way. So that's what I thought it was. So I started taking allergy medications, all sorts of things. And I did this for 3 days, hoping that I wouldn't have to tell anybody that I'm concerned. And by Saturday night, I was concerned and called you and was like, look, I don't know. I'm just telling you. Mike Minnick, who's in the booth with us, I'm like, you might have to call the game. I'm just telling you. And then I called CJ and I told him, and I go, I don't know. Like this happened last year. We had a game where my voice was out, and I'm like, I don't want to do that again. And so I just want to warn you. So we fire drilled Jackson up from Virginia Beach to sit in the booth with me last night just in case. And then I felt terrible because I did both of the games. It sounded fine, and
Yeah.
I didn't need him to do that. So actually, I felt bad that I made Jackson drive all the way up here.
I just get him some beer. He'll be fine. He'll take that as a repayment there. But I
It
mean,
was, yeah, I owe him one. I owe him one big time because he doesn't live around here anymore, and he drove all the way up on the just in case. He does the post game show anyway, so
sure.
he was going to be here. So what? I mean, he was going to be on the air anyway, but he didn't have to be here. So I felt bad about that. So I owe Jack a big apology. So if he needs me to do 18 free appearances on his show in Virginia Beach, I'm available.
There you go. Exactly. Exactly.
As for the game last night, I won't spend a ton of time on it because they started nobody. You know, like they really didn't play anybody. I will say, like New England did, at least on offense. New England did because they have a quarterback race going on. So we got a chance to see the backup defensive players go against largely a starting offense, and they needed a few penalties to probably really help them last night, but they stood up to it. And maybe I'll talk about this a little bit more later because I want to stay on the Commanders, but I thought Drake May looked pretty good. Actually, seeing him in person, he actually
Yeah.
looked pretty good. But overall, the thing that really stood out to me, at least from the game, outside of a couple players that I'll bring up in a minute, was like this is spreading. Like this team is into it. Like they're jumping up and down the sideline. Trace McSorley is trucking cornerbacks in the fourth quarter. They're going crazy on the sideline. This happened last week in Miami too, and a couple guys made a couple plays. They're going nuts on the sideline over it. Happened in the first week when Tress Way ran down and made a tackle on a punt, and they're going crazy on the sideline. And so I think it's the thing. Like I actually like this whole. You're going to like the way we play. We're going to be very together. We're going to be in it for each other. We're going to play really hard. I'm seeing it. Like I'm seeing it in games that don't even matter. I'm seeing it early here.
No, I mean, I think once again, this stems from the offseason too. Like I think this started with John Allen and Terry and Duran when they were saying, "Oh, like this is completely changed." And I think we were waiting to see what that vibe was going to be. Well, now I think this is what we've gotten. It's literally everybody cheering on everybody. No one's really like taking plays off, even if you're on the sideline. I shouldn't say I'm not surprised because it sounds like there's a reason why Dan Quinn won, getting this coaching job, right? We were all kind of wondering because he wasn't the sexiest pick in the world. It's now becoming apparent this is exactly what he told ownership that he wanted to do and help change the culture. I would just say this. I'm shocked it's happened already like this. Like, you can really tell it's been different literally since the first day he's been in.
Yeah.
I'm surprised just because I think with us, we've been kind of traumatized of like, oh, it's all going to change. And then it never changes. And this time around, it seems like it finally has.
The other day, the last practice of training camp was Friday. They were not in pads. It was like a walkthrough, but the walkthrough was Dan Quinn. I've never seen anything like this. It was actually really cool. Dan Quinn was on a microphone, like announcing situations, and all of them were like 14 seconds left, one timeout, ball at the 42-yard line, go. And then like 17 seconds left, 2 timeouts left, ball at R48, go. And then he'd let it play out, and then they'd like, and he was just like on the mic talking them through the whole thing, and everybody was into it. Like typically, like a Friday walkthrough, end of camp, everybody was totally into it. And I'm seeing this over and over and over. So his reputation has carried over here. Players like playing for him. Now, we're going to see what happens over the next couple of days because they have a lot of decisions to make. So it's going to be very difficult couple of days. But like when they say this is the hardest part of my job, I actually believe it from him. I actually believe it that he has relationships with these people and they're playing really hard for him and the competition's really high. And there's even guys like Phil Mathis last night who, as of a couple of weeks ago, were sitting there going, I don't know if he's going to make the team. Let's put him on the list of bad Rivera picks. Like all that stuff is going to start happening. And even he was making plays last night and jumping around and acting like a kid on the field after he makes a couple of plays. And you start to go, well, maybe he's going to make the team now. Like it's really carried over to everybody. And it's nice to see off of last year where, God, we were flatlined, at this point going into the season. I mean, I think back to this now and I'm like, I don't know how we were 2-0, honestly, considering what was going on.
No, I'm with you. And you know what? I don't know what the messaging was to the team beforehand, but you could also tell as well, everyone always says this, like, oh, make sure you show up that last preseason game because you never know who's going to be watching, right? Like that's always the stereotypical coach speak and what all the players want to say. Last night, it actually seemed that way, that like, even if Fedarian Mathis doesn't make the team, he left 110% out there and some other team's going to see, oh, that guy looks pretty good. Like to me, I got the vibe. They actually were going out there and saying, no matter what happens, we're all good with each other. And then hopefully we all get picked up somewhere else.
Yeah, I'll get back to all that stuff in a minute. I want to do a couple of the top line things that occurred. Chris Collinsworth goes on the air and says Jayden Daniels is going to be a superstar. Uses the words superstar. So I saw Mike Tirico, who's actually on the pregame show with us yesterday. I know Mike from my days at ESPN. He's great. And he was talking to us actually a lot about Jayden because he said, I called the Notre Dame games. So I know Brian Kelly. So he said, I talked to him, regularly, and I talked to him a lot before the draft, and he went on and on and on about the work ethic of Jayden Daniels and all that stuff. But that's what you would expect from his coach. How
did Brian Kelly sound, by the way?
Yeah. I can't do it today. You're asking me to, I'm off the impressions today. As you can tell, I'm fighting it still. So I'm off the impressions today. The adrenaline's gone. So like now that I can't even do I'd like to do a Paul for that Georgia Tech coach too, but I can't do it.
Run the dang ball, Paul.
That guy was amazing. That's my new favorite college. I'm a big Georgia Tech fan now after that guy. I love that dude. Anyway, so Tirico's like going on and on about him. I saw Collinsworth and Tirico at the Friday practice. They were having their production meetings. They got Jayden Daniels. Tirico was telling me off the air, on and on and on about how he goes, this guy sounds different to me. Like, I get it. I know. I've seen it all. He was going on and on about him. Obviously, his abilities are obvious. You can watch it. And then Adam Peters was talking to Collinsworth for a while on Friday. So, I don't know if the rubber stamp of approval from Collinsworth means anything to anybody, but he was pretty effusive. I didn't see it, but I heard about it, and he was pretty effusive about it, that they're like, they got it right this time. They really did.
No, I mean, it doesn't mean nothing when he says someone's going to be a superstar. And obviously when he says that, like you said, he's been speaking with people around the team. He's been hanging out a bunch. I'm not surprised here, but once again, I feel like Commanders fans, for the most part, are all very much will believe it when we see it. We have been peddled this for 20 plus years, and I agree. This one's probably different, but I think we're all in the wait and see mode 100% for them.
Yeah, I mean, this is I think the only other time, but he has the second overall pick. I mean, you should have the hype. I mean, like
Sure.
that goes with the territory of it. And the last time we had this was RG3 because I think even with Haskins as a first round pick, the whole thing after it happened was even people on the inside of the organization didn't believe he should have been picked that high.
Right. Right.
Right. So that's not a good way to start. If you're trying to build a hype train, that's not a good way to start. With RG3, Heisman Trophy winner, crazy athlete, number 2 overall pick, then did come out of the gates and looked incredible. You know, like dual threat, came out of that New Orleans game. I remember sitting there. We found our quarterback for the first time in my lifetime. And I'm hoping we get that in Tampa in a couple of weeks. And I'm hoping we have a very different thread line than RG3's afterwards with Jayden. But, you know, I don't want to. I've also been trying to be careful and not get too far ahead of myself. I also have seen it all. I also know that the organization's gone out of its way to like not push that too hard. But every day he looks better. The other day he did one of those behind the back passes like Mahomes in practice. He seems very cool, calm, collected. He seems pass first, which I like. He seems to know the offense. And while we didn't get to see him last night, you know, hearing Chris say that and all this guy does is, you know, watch football all day long I like hearing it too, but I'm like, again, like, I don't like it's like how much stock I don't know. Is this Warren Buffett picking a stock for me? I don't know. Like it feels a little bit like that.
I think the other comparison, because you mentioned RG3 there too, is that I don't think a lot of people are talking about is in both cases with RG3 and Jayden, they were both overshadowed by clear-cut number 1 guys that had been like preordained for a couple of years, both in Luck and in Caleb Williams' case too. And so I think what's always funny about this is when we have these types of drafts, unless you're the team that got that guy, the rest of the fans in the league, I'm not saying they don't know anything about Jayden, but for the most part, they're going, oh, well, he was the first overall pick. How good could he be? And instead, you have Caleb Williams and Andrew Luck overshadowing those guys basically from the get-go. And so it's actually kind of, I think it's helpful for both of them in this case that it was like, oh, we don't really know what we have. And then when you find out, you're like, oh my God, this is actually someone that's legit. And in RG3's case, yeah, it happened right away, but it fizzled out pretty fast.
I mean, we have 2 weeks to talk about it, but like, what are we unleashing in Tampa? I don't know. I don't really actually think I've seen it. Both sides of the ball. I really don't think I've seen it.
Yeah.
We had Bobby Wagner on the game broadcast last night. And what you guys are going to do on defense, and he immediately said no. So like they're not really showing us, you know, like a lot of the guys like Allen Payne, Wagner, they never played a snap in the preseason. You know, when I watch practice, there's a million times, I think I've said this over the last 5 weeks, like they're not showing us anything. I don't know what they're going to be. I really don't. I think when the doors are closed, it's very different. So I am very, very hopeful that Jayden's fast tracked into a spot where they feel really good about him. This defense can't be worse. It's going to be better, like considerably better than what it was. I actually think they're very strong up the middle. We'll see if that plays out to be true, but I think they are. I don't know. I still see the same weaknesses, but can they fool Tampa enough to pull off an upset, you know, in week 1 because they don't know what's coming? And how could they possibly have any film on this? Like, even when I talked to London and Logan on the broadcast, they're like, I don't think we've seen what they're going to do. So they're trying to stay as under the radar and unknown, at least through the first couple of weeks. Then they have tape on you and it's too late and it's out there. But if it steals you a win or two early with a young new team like this, it could start the type of momentum that we saw on the sideline last night. Because the reality is, like, they're all going to be in it for the team and psyched and pumped and going at it when you're competitive, which look at their schedule here. 3 of the first 4 on the road, 4 of the first 6 on the road. A couple of them are Cincinnati, a West Coast trip, Baltimore. It's a very tough schedule. Tampa Bay, who I buy as a candidate to repeat as a division winner this year. Like, I buy that totally. Like, this is a very hard schedule that they're starting with, and most of it's on the road. So they're going to have to steal something here or there to try to, I think, get through it till they get around to the home part of the schedule.
Well, I don't think they're hiding it either. Like, we've basically heard it not directly, but alluded to, and we've talked about it tons of times here, is that they're clearly going to try to run the ball first. Like, they're not going to have Jayden, like, lean on Jayden early. At least that's what it feels like. Like, Cliff has gone out of his way to say, I really like Robinson. I really like Eckler. And I really want to get the run game going. I think what he's basically alluding to is they're going to try to keep these games close early on and then use Jayden to win them. Like, I think this is kind of like the formula they're going to do in the first month of the season, or at least first 2 weeks of the season. And then we're going to see what Jayden can do. But I think what he's kind of alluded to is like they're not going to try to make it too hard on him right away. And I think it's going to be a lot of run the dang ball with this team in the first couple of weeks, just to get Jayden like acclimated to this. And I think that's perfectly okay.
I got to tell you, like, the more and more I think about the Dotson trade, and I think it's more complicated than this, but like, because, obviously there was something off between either he and the team, or was it his confidence? Was it his physical play down the field? Was it all of it? Like, did they just feel like they might as well get an asset for him, especially if they're just going to not play him a lot, which is what seemed to be what it was heading towards. But there's also this part of me that goes, this team using 2 tight ends, 2 running backs, 21, 22 personnel, it doesn't really actually feel that off to me. Everyone keeps talking about air raid, and they just picture this 4 wide receiver set, Jayden Daniels chucking it all over the field. I don't know about that. Like, is that going to be part of the arsenal? Sure. Like, in the same way, are they going to use his legs and have designed runs? Of course they are. Like, why wouldn't they? But I don't think it's going to be a feature of what they do. And more, I look at this and I'm like, I could see them running the ball a lot, or having Eckler and Robinson on the field a lot, and putting Eckler in the slot, or running him in motion, or having him come out of the backfield and then handing it off. Like, I actually think this might be a more simpler run the ball offense, at least initially, than people think. And I don't think that's the bottom line on the Dotson trade. Like, well, we're only going to use 2 receivers most of the time. But I do think it's part of it. I think it's a tell a little bit, maybe, that like they do intend to use 2 running backs, 2 tight ends more often. And therefore, when's he even going to get on the field? If he hasn't emerged as an obvious number 2, he's not going to be a physical receiver down the field, which they really value and want, and they get out of guys like De'Ami Brown, Terry McLaurin, etc. Well, if he's not going to play a lot, and we don't intend to spread the field and try to run some spread offense, well, then maybe we ought to get something for him and get an asset back.
This also just plays into what this coaching staff has done the whole time, and that's use the players to the best of their abilities and the scheme, right? So they could have also looked at this early at the personnel and gone, there's not enough wide receivers to run that air raid offense. Let's pivot over to a more run style with Jayden, who can open that up. And we'll go ahead and sign Austin Eckler, where he doesn't have to be the starter here. And then there's Brian Robinson, who looks really good. Like, they could have very well just gone, this is what we've got to run right now because this is just the personnel that we had. That wouldn't surprise me either. This just seems like a smarter group than in the past.
Yeah, I look at it too and I go, you're going to run some 4 wide receiver set and you don't have any real burners outside of Terry. Like, what do we really? Yep. Are you? Like, so I agree. I think that they're assessing what they have. And I don't think that they can play that style. And, maybe, listen, do you come out for a series to try to change things up and do it because you trust Jayden, you try to get the ball out fast? Sure. Okay. Like, and you throw people like Eckler in the slot, or you throw Zacchaeus in the slot, maybe McCaffrey. Like, okay, like I'll buy that and I'll see it, but I don't think that's their offense. It doesn't feel like that's what will be their offense. But again, like, I don't know. Like they haven't really showed us what they're going to do. So I don't really know what they're going to be till we get out to Tampa.
It could also be the more dangerous thing for them is we'd rather have Ertz and Sinnott out there than Terry, Brown, Dotson, and McCaffrey, or insert wide receiver 4. You know what I mean? Like, they might just say, we're better off with the 2 tight ends because it gives us way more options to run the ball. And they like what they've seen from both of those tight ends to actually catch the ball.
I got to tell you too, a bunch of empty backfields with the tackle situation on this team also feels risky to me. And like, I don't know, like, I don't think Wiley's had the best summer, but I've been all along going, I'm willing to have a redo with him because I thought the scheme was part of the problem. So I want to get a redo with him, but they may on week 1 put a rookie tackle out there, maybe as a starter, who didn't play a single snap in the preseason because he got hurt. And they may not. They may choose to go with Lucas because they just feel that's a steadier situation. But at some point, he's going to walk out there. You picture empty sets with that. I don't I don't think they're going to put themselves in that kind of danger personally.
No, I agree 100%. And once again, I think it's just that set gives them more options all the way around: protection, passing, running, everything. I think that's why we're going to see a lot of heavier sets.
I do want to go back to last night for a moment because Trace McSorley, we called him the MVP on the broadcast last night. 2 fourth quarter touchdown drives. He's from Ashburn. He's openly admitted, it's very cool to put on this jersey, having grown up here. He was there for 2 days when he had to play, in the Miami game and had a chance actually to win at the end. And boy, did he take advantage of it. He trucked a corner. Everybody went crazy over it. He led a couple of touchdown drives. He all of a sudden gave life to Martavis Bryant to potentially make the team because of the number of the plays that he made in the fourth quarter. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But I'm just giving the flowers to the hometown kid who, let's be fair, is probably not going to be on the team as of tomorrow because, look at the quarterback situation that's in front of him. But as someone who gets to call the games of my hometown team and know what that feels like, and not that Trace McSorley hasn't been in the NFL, been on a number of teams already and was drafted in the whole thing. So he's already had that kind of dream. There must have been something really cool for him last night to actually lead a fourth quarter win wearing that jersey last night.
No, if there was one positive takeaway from last night, not one, but the best takeaway from last night, it was definitely watching him and his scrambling right off the bat was oh, he's treating this as a legitimate game. Once I saw him take off for that first one in the third quarter, I was kind of thinking, oh, he's gonna definitely do some damage here. And then he trucked that cornerback. So no, it was a great story.
So you want to talk about Bryant for a minute here?
Sure.
So when they signed him, I didn't think anything of it. This is pre the Dotson trade. I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, you know what? He's a bigger, taller, different athletic profile than anything they have on the team. So, and he used to be really good, but that was a long time ago. And he's bounced around for a lot of reasons we don't need to revisit here. There's a lot of reasons why his career went the way it went. And it's been 6 years since he played in a regular season game. But he was in Dallas last year. He was on their practice squad. He never got called up, but Quinn knew him, and they worked him out in the spring and they didn't sign him. So that kind of weighs in my feelings about where this goes from here, because I think if they felt like there was a big arrow pointing up, I think they would have brought him in the spring, but they didn't. And now they get to the summer and they bring him in anyway. And he was really good last time. He's had a lot of really good plays, albeit at the end of games with all third string players and all that stuff. And he should dominate something like that. This is a guy who, for a couple seasons up in Pittsburgh looked like a Pro Bowler. So, he should dominate people like this, but had a touchdown catch on a slant last night, had a seal block on the other touchdown that occurred the week before. When there was a late interception, he caused the fumble from the corner to get the ball back to give them a final chance. And I will go back to, they have no one else on their receiving core that looks like him at his size and athleticism. And so I'm going with there's a 20% chance now that he is going to make the team. I am more inclined to believe that you just put him on the practice squad because you can. And I don't see any reason not to. And just keep playing with them. And if an injury occurs or something, bring them up and see what happens. But I'm going with it's about a 20% chance now because there's no one else on the roster that fits his profile at all.
No, you said exactly what I was going to say. He's a practice squad player, bare minimum. And if another team picks him up, good for him. But there's no way I think you kind of let him go. And to your point, too, not only did he, have that effort at the end of games, he caused that fumble, too. And I'm kind of thinking, all right, the guy's motor is clearly still there. That's actually really impressive to me because I think you and I have seen it a million times over where you sign the veteran guy for training camp and see what you've got. And you never really see an effort like this. They do okay a lot of times, but this is one where I actually really like his effort. I feel like he actually, he knows how important this chance is. And we've just seen him take advantage of every chance pretty much.
Yeah. I thought Quinn, I don't know if you heard him last night, but really spoke eloquently about him, saying how happy everybody is and described it as as players and people in this league, everybody's journey is very different. And his obviously is very rocky. He could have had a very different career, but he's still here and he's still going at it. He could have quit a million times. And I think they appreciate that. There's something, I mean, that is the quality that Quinn really admires, is the effort, desire, enthusiasm, never quit, play hard. And, we'll see if he rewards that with an actual roster spot. I still feel like that's unlikely. But off of what I've seen the last few weeks on this test run with him, I would put him on the practice squad for sure and see how it goes. Now, I don't know a lot about him and I don't know a lot about his history, but considering what we know and why his career got derailed, the idea that it lasts any period of time is probably something the organization wants to see. But if he hits certain benchmarks in that regard, then I could see a incredible comeback story that could materialize at some point this season.
No, and also I think these wide receivers, they remind me of the offensive line a little bit in terms of an actual unit. Like, there's the clear cut one is Terry, right? And then it's Brown, but we don't know how that's going to shake out across 17 weeks of games, right? Like, we're going to see different looks. Someone's going to get hurt. I think it opens the door for him somewhere down the line as long as he keeps this effort up during practice and throughout the season.
And on Diami, like, he's like a number 2 per se. I think they've been like, but I agree. Like, I think we need to see it in terms of the playmaking. What they like about him is he's a very physical, willing participant player, and they want their guys to block down the field, and they trust him that way. I think it's why he emerged to the level he did. I think he's capable of making these plays, and until he gets the opportunity over and over and over, we're going to find out if he does that. But I need to see that part to believe it. But I know what he is in the physical part of the game, which is why he emerged the way he did. All right, we'll take a quick break. Cuts are coming tomorrow. We'll talk about it next. Bram and Callow Show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. All right, welcome back. Bram and Callow Show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. Cuts come tomorrow. I don't think there's a tremendous amount of decisions to make, really. The list of players who did not play last night was very, very long. And even Dan Quinn smiled when asked, is that an acknowledgement of the people who are going to make the team? And I think his answer was, you're barking up the right tree. So does that mean now that Dotson's gone, Crowder's the punt returner, even though that they wanted to give Kaz Allen chance after chance after chance after chance? Probably, because he didn't suit up last night. So I am now guessing that Jamison Crowder is going to make the team, be on it as the 5th or 6th receiver because he's the punt returner. And on the other side of that, I think they've given Kaz Allen 8 million chances to pop something. He hasn't done it. I don't know if that ultimately matters. I don't know if it comes down to you had to do something in one of these games to definitively get a roster spot, but he didn't. So I'm not sure where that's going to land with him tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised it's going to be Crowder. I think this kind of even goes back into last year's, decision on signing him was, when in doubt, sign the veteran that's going to catch the ball and get you a few yards. And I think Crowder is fine for doing that. Plus, we know he can play a little wide receiver with the state of the wide receiver room. Kaz Allen, I think if they had a good enough wide receiver room, would be a luxury. Like, he would be a guy that you put on the practice squad or put on one of those last roster spots and you try to coach him up and be a gadget guy. But they don't have that luxury with the way the wide receiver room looks and the way the running back room looks right now.
Yeah. I mean, they've done this with a couple of players. They've moved them positionally because I think they're feeling a squeeze in position groups and they feel like there's an opening somewhere else. So they started calling Kaz Allen a running back and working him at the running back room because I think they feel like there's a spot there. And I'll get into that in a second. There is. So I don't in fact, so much so that I wouldn't be shocked that after cuts from around the league, they may look at a veteran running back if they feel like there's an upgrade there behind Robinson and Eckler. That wouldn't actually surprise me if they go in that direction, because none of the players there have emerged in a way that it's obvious that that person has to be the number 3 running back. Michael Wiley has some burst. So does Allen. They've worked him back there. He also has this prolific, record from high school where he basically was a running back. But, this is one of those situations where he's probably fastest guy on the field. So he gets out in the open field. No one's ever catching him. That's not what's going to be the case here. They have described him like Debo, not in build, obviously, but to move him around the field. So they have a lot of hope in him, but are they trying to convince themselves that they've got something there? And that may be what's happening right now. I think bare minimum, he's a practice squad player because I know that they like him, and it doesn't mean they couldn't give him an opportunity at a later date. But as it stands right now, I just haven't seen the type of explosiveness. And I also feel like this also to me is an acknowledgement that they know they don't have a lot of explosive players. So they're just looking for it. They're trying to find people who could provide it. Kaz Allen could provide it. Wiley could provide it. So one of those two, if not both, are probably going to make the team. If for no other reason, they're looking for spark plugs because they have a lot of very good players. Robinson, Eckler, I think McLaurin could make big plays, but no one's saying he's Tyreek Hill. And then you look at the rest of the team and you go, Ertz isn't beating you downfield, but I like him. Sinnett's not killing you downfield, I don't think, but you like him. You know, Diami here and there. McCaffrey's probably not a downfield threat. Robinson, he ain't busting off Jahmyr Gibbs runs, but he's probably going to have a big season for them. But it's going to happen at the 5 to 10 yards a clip type of thing. They need explosive players. I think it's an acknowledgement they don't have explosive players, which is why I think they're so hoping and convincing themselves that it's either Wiley, Allen, or both.
No, I think it sounds about right. Like the desperation to get those explosive plays is why this is happening, right? Like I didn't think we'd be in the third preseason game having a whole thing about Kaz Allen, but we are because clearly they know what they lack on the offensive side of the ball and possibly returning. And it's also, if we get the ball in this guy's hands once or twice a game, maybe he pops one. I do think it's not great, though, that last night he got all those chances and didn't really do what they wanted him to do, but he still might make it off of just kind of the desperation that they have.
Yeah. So if you go also on the theory that like the guys who weren't playing are mainly safe, or maybe a couple of them are IR because it's the rules different this year. You could put two guys on IR and not have to shelve them for the season. That was a change in the rules this year. So I'll see how they handle the rookie Jordan McGee, who can't play right now, but they feel is going to come back. Will they IR him for the season or will they IR him short term? And there's a limited number of guys you can do this with through the season. So it's not as easy a decision as you would think it would be. But if you go on this theory of the guys who didn't play were pretty much safe, and the guys who were out there that, you know, that aren't buried deep on the depth chart are the guys fighting for spots, then it reopens the conversation about Jamin Davis. Like he was out there, he was playing. London was basically saying to me on the air last night, you know, look, he just needs reps, like reps. Like, don't read into this differently that he's, you know, that he's fighting for his job. It's more about this transition for him. It's just good for him to be on the field and playing in this position more and more and more and more. And that's where he kind of landed on it. But I was skeptical of it. Because in the end, while I do appreciate what he's doing here, I do appreciate his enthusiasm for it, his desire to do it. The coaches have credited him for that. The reality is they've got to trust him to play at this position. So I'm kind of 50-50 at this point. I have a feeling that like I wouldn't cut him in the same way I would talk about Jahan Dotson. If they didn't feel like he was getting there, I would try to move him before I would actually cut him. He's a former first-round pick. So I would try to move him first and get an asset back. And then on the other side, do you keep him on the roster and go with him? I mean, I feel like it's 50-50 right now for that.
I mean, I think he was always going to stick around mainly because when you do keep him, you're going to get that third-round compensatory pick. I mean, honestly, that was – unless he was absolutely terrible in training camp and preseason, I always felt they were going to keep him. And I actually think he's been kind of a pleasant surprise about how he's played so far too. I always thought he was going to stick around mainly because of that. So I guess you have to ask the question, does a team come and want to do a third round pick for him like they did with Chase last year? Like that's the only thing I could see. I don't see any team stepping up and doing that. So I think he's ultimately on the team.
I do too. But I 50-50 if someone comes along with something because that's where I am on it. So we'll see. Defensive tackle. Phil Mathis and John Ridgway seemingly are fighting for a spot. Because Allen, Payne, Newton, who obviously couldn't play in the preseason, but is their second round pick and obviously is going to make the team. Mathis or Ridgway. That's another one. Could some team come along with an asset for one of those two? Like, I actually think that would be a good scenario for this team if someone showed up with something of any kind of value at all for either one of them. And I think Adam Peters have to seriously think about it because I don't think they can both make the team.
Yeah, no, that's one too. I look at that, at least with Mathis, he was a second round pick. So you can actually kind of hype up to somebody, hey, he's got talent, and you could blame a lot of the previous regime on him. So there's got to be a little bit of value there. The same thing, when it ultimately boils down to it, if the season rolls down to one of those two tackles, we're in deep trouble. But no, I think another team, if they are desperate for one of those guys, I think they would be a good move.
And then at corner, Sandra still is day one starter in the slot. Forbes is going to make the team. There's no question about it. Forbes, St. Juice, Sandra still, Michael Davis, probably Igbenogany, but he did play last night. That was interesting. But I think so. That's 5. So if there's a 6th, I think it's Tariq Castro Fields. But is there a surprise at the bottom of that room where Castro Fields beats out somebody? I don't know. So I think that one could be a Tuesday surprise, like what that room actually looks like.
I think that one is also the prime candidate for we don't have a name that could finish out the roster. That they could be on another team right now. I think that's the prime unit that we might not be talking about whoever's going to be in there week 1.
Yeah, I said this a week ago, and I still believe it now. And Quinn even hinted at it last night. I think there are 3 to 5 players that are on other teams right now that are going to end up being on this team over the course of the next couple of weeks. It's not just after cutdown day, you can make a couple moves. After week 1, teams, have to kind of maneuver their roster a little bit to try to protect a couple of players, and then they make a couple of cuts. So I really wouldn't actually be surprised if Quinn said it best. He goes, we're second in the waiver wire. He goes, I hope we're never there again, but we might as well take advantage of it while we're here.
Yeah.
So I think we're 3 to 5 players. Corner is a room I would watch. Running back is a room I would watch. Receiver, obviously offensive line. If some surprise happens out there that somebody of value actually gets put out on the open market, I think that's a possibility. All of them are in question. And then the last one I'll just bring up that I'm wondering about is safety. So they, because it's very crowded, they moved Dominic Hampton, the 5th round pick, to linebacker, I think, to try to make room for him because the safety room is very crowded with Juan and Chin as the obvious starters. Percy Butler, who I'm assuming is going to make the team. Jeremy Reeves, who I think is in a battle to make the team. And Derek Forrest. And then Tyler Owens really emerged. And I'm just having a hard time buying that they're not going to keep him the way they've talked about him and profiled him. So Derek Forrest and Jeremy Reeves are 2 names that I'm watching very closely here. And, I can't see a scenario by which they release Derek Forrest, but there may not be room. So I think that's an interesting one to watch tomorrow.
It's definitely an interesting one too, because I thought he was going to be one of the guys that really thrived in this scheme. Like he's always been he's one of those guys that has always flown around, like even when they were not good and there's not as much enthusiasm. He was always one of the guys that always had it turned on. That's probably one of the more surprising, ones of this entire training camp is that we haven't just heard about him a little bit more. I thought he would be one of the names they talk about often.
Yeah, he missed a lot of camp early with a hamstring injury. He was coming off that bad shoulder injury from a year ago. But I was like, when these guys were hired, I'm like, oh, they're going to love him. I'm like,
yeah,
plays fast, hits hard. He's a missile. They're going to love him. And it just hasn't been there. So he's one I'm watching pretty closely tomorrow as well. All right, let me take a quick break. Bram wants to show ESPN 630 Sports Capital.
Are you, by the way, going to hit Cruz in this last one?
Dylan Cruz?
Yeah.
Sure.
I have a theory here if you want to bring him up.
Okay. Welcome back. Bram wants to show ESPN 630 The Sports Capital. One quick football thing that I just can't let go over the weekend. Trey Lance can never be Dallas' starter, right? I mean, whoever's fever dreams of we don't have to pay Dak because we have Trey Lance, that has to be over now, right? Through 5 picks in a preseason game, that has to be over now.
Yeah, but he had that long touchdown run. Come on. Yeah, he looked great. No, I don't think it was ever realistic. I think they wanted to see what they had.
That was I don't know what I don't know, because remember, he hadn't really played down there, and it was like, all right, he's a really high draft pick. He's a great athlete, like second chance, let's see. And then they gave him the whole game in the 3rd preseason game, and some of the interceptions were ridiculous too, like absolutely ridiculous.
He might have played himself off that roster. I mean, we've ran into this a couple of times with Dallas where, remember, you and I have yelled and screamed, who's playing behind Dak?
Yeah.
In multiple years. If you're Dallas, why are you not getting another veteran in there? Because you have well, and you have enough talent that a veteran could step in and be fine. So yeah, I think he might have played himself off that roster.
One other quick one too before I forget about it. Drake May has to be New England starter, right?
He
made
good.
one play last night where I went, oh man, well. Like it's looking like the top 3 quarterbacks are all looking really good right now. He's really emerged over. Remember the story early in their camp was he's looked terrible and Brissett's definitively the starter. I mean, I know it was a short sample last night, but there's no way that in the middle of the second quarter, New England Twitter wasn't saying, we know who our starting quarterback is.
Well, especially if Brissett's hurt, right? He's going to have to play. If Brissett is actually like not going to be good to go for week 1, then yeah, he's definitely going to play. I also think if you're Drake May, all you heard in this draft was, oh yeah, you got to sit for a year, to be a good starter. I'm sure he took all of this to heart and was probably studying his ass off every single night to make sure that he was getting better. So good for him. I mean, he's definitely bucked the trend a little bit.
All right, a couple non-football items before I go today. Dylan Cruz is coming up for the Nationals. So we get this. The future is now. Dylan Cruz, James Wood together. We get to see them together. What do you make of that?
All right, so I got a 2-parter here. One, second time this year the Nats have done the advanced call-up. As in, hey, we're calling this guy up, but it's going to be on Monday. Great. I'm so glad. Like, it gives people a chance to come see these guys for their first game. I'm just saying, when you suck and you're not going to make the playoffs, these are the only things we have to look forward to as fans.
This is entertainment. You need to cater to the fans and explain to them you're doing these things.
And I explain it all the time. I love the Orioles. I love that they're our partner, but I explain this to you. They called up Adley Rutschman on Preakness Saturday morning. Like, no one up there was going to that game. Like, that's a disaster. So kudos to the kudos to the Nats for doing that.
They didn't call up Rutschman. You're drunk at the Preakness.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that probably was that
Look,
exchange.
it's right here on my phone there, Han.
Right. So kudos to the Nats for doing that right, because I feel like I need to point that out. Number 2, I'm just going to throw a theory out there. They decided we're not going to bring Dylan Cruz down to Atlanta. We're going to call him up on Monday. Who do the Nats play tonight, tomorrow, and Wednesday? The Yankees. Who's a free agent on the Yankees coming up this year? And they go to Juan Soto. Hey, you see Cruz out there? You see Woods out there? You could be the third outfielder. You get to be the guy that anchors all of these young guys now. Is this Rizzo and the Lerners kind of going, hey, man, if we match up on money, this could be the lineup that you slide into?
You think they're paying him $600 million?
I think they could. Have you seen what they have to pay on their payroll next year?
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
because
no joke.
Corbin's gone. They're like, now we can give somebody $600 million.
Their payroll next year, the only numbers that are in before arbitration kicks in is $40 million. They're spending nothing on their roster next year. They could sign Juan Soto and still only have $100 million payroll. So they if this happens, I said this on my show on Friday. If they were to sign Juan Soto and convince him to come back here, Mike Rizzo is a Hall of Fame executive. He goes into the Baseball Hall of Fame, I think.
Soto, by the way, said to Yankees fans, talk to Brian Cashman if you want me back here. Did you hear that one? Did you see that one?
That's good. Quote. I didn't see that. That's
Brian
good.
Cashman if you want me back here, which I liked.
He's a Rizzo client. He's going to hit free agency.
This is malpractice that I spent this Monday show without talking about the Sean Taylor installation, but I've run out of time. So I promise I will do it tomorrow and I will weigh in on it. Then spoiler, they're doing the right thing. Yes. Anyway, we'll talk about that tomorrow. But one thing before we go, because we did the Spirit match yesterday. So as of midweek last week, because there were 5 Olympians on the Spirit, 4 of them played on the U.S. team that won the gold medal. Gabby Carl played for the Canadian team. The 4 U.S. Olympians, Hal Hirschfeld, who was an alternate and didn't play, was going to play against Kansas City. Just 2 of the top 3 teams in the NWSL resuming play, right? The other 3 were all question marks, and it was pretty certain that Trinity Rodman and Casey Kruger were not playing. Then all of a sudden, like out of the blue, they put them in the lineup. They were like shot out of a cannon, and they just leapfrogged the second place team, who was a prolific scoring team that they completely shut down. They dominated them. And I'm starting to get a funny feeling here that under this new coach with these new players that they've brought in and the way they looked off of a break, having together, that they're extremely dangerous. And like, we might be calling a championship season. I'm pretty excited about what's going on here.
I think you hit it on the head there. All these things are really exciting. But when your top players who weren't supposed to play all week decide they're going to go and play against that team in Kansas City, the rest of the team fell in line and was like, okay, we're not going to lose this game. You know how sports are, man. That's one of those moments that like makes a locker room really like come together. And as you said, they have all these new players that also were great yesterday. And you had Paige Mateer score one of the best goals we've seen all year, go end to end essentially on a new position. All of the storylines for the Spirit had a lot of question marks heading into the second half of the season, and they were all answered, and they look even better than they did before. It's exciting. It's exciting.
They did. They looked great. They won 4-1 against Kansas City. And then our next broadcast is in a couple of weeks. We'll take on Portland back at Audi Field. All right. That'll do it for today. Talk to you tomorrow. Bram Show, ESPN 630, the Sportscast.